Welcome back. As always, the CRC Review is your home for common sense analytical commentary on salient topics impacting our economy and society. The health of our democracy has become a salient topic for discussion as politicians use it in their line of attacks. There is no denying that our democracy is not operating as our founders intended or modern-day Americans expect it to. Our founding fathers established a nation built on the ideal of freedom, self-determination, and limited government in hopes of setting the stage for a nation centered around the people. While the era of our nation's founding was not perfect, the ideals stood the test of time, and affording them universally without regard to demographics is the right path forward. The rejection of our ideals in favor of greater power for a government that people hold to account the many ills of society is hypocritical and not in society's best interest. What is truly healthy for our democracy is empowering the people and fostering private enterprise to ensure true freedom, preventing our government from circumventing our freedom, choice, and opportunity through the power of the purse for their political interests. Many of the issues with our democracy are not found in one person, one party, one institution, or one moment, but a collection of actions and events that eroded our faith in how America is governed. First area of focus should be the prevalence of partisan government. A healthy democracy understands that all elected officials, regardless of party, represent the people. Excluding sets of politicians silences the voices of the people they represent. A healthy democracy cannot accept the farce that certain voices matter more than others. The voices of every American should matter regardless of whether one disagrees with the political views. Americans should understand how we got to this point. The partisan approach to government largely stems from our former President Barack Obama, whose post-presidency career appears to be lecturing America on what is healthy for democracy based on his political views. Obama was not the first president to come into office with party control of both houses of Congress. He is the first one to exploit the opportunity to exclude the GOP from key negotiations of critical legislation. Breaking with practice of compromise and bipartisan leadership that preceded him for generations. Obama laid a foundation for the idea of partisan government, making it clear many times his clear lack of intention to engage with people not from his political party or even ideological background. After Democrats lost Congress, Obama infamously remarked he still had a pen and paper, choosing to govern by executive order rather than compromise with elected representatives of the people. Recall when President Bill Clinton faced a similar situation, he effectively worked across the aisle to complete the work of the American people. All hoped the precedent would end with his administration, but unfortunately it continued to some degree. Our democratic society needs bipartisanship. Our founding fathers wanted the voices of the people to be heard. Not just a select few, but all points of view. Time-honored principles reason that well-debated ideas help shape effective solutions. Many traditional media outlets and social media companies greatly distort the real concerns conservatives have with how these companies battle political misinformation, as the actions appear more like censorship in some cases. There is a greater need for honesty, decorum, and evidence-based discussions in our national discourse, but there is no room in a healthy democracy for the voices of some be silent by the intolerance of others. There is clear reason to see the argument as legitimate based not only on the recent situation with the New York Post, but pattern of behaviors in how similar incidents face different outcomes based largely on the political demographics of the content creator or distributor. The standard for labeling or removal is clearly not applied even-handedly. Consider how many posts regarding the Russia stole our election remain unaffected despite there being no credible evidence to prove that narrative. No labels ever applied to content regarding the Kavanaugh fabricated accusations. How many posts calling for violence from the left remain unlabeled and unremoved by these social media reviewers? If standards call for content that directly counters subtle fact or promotes violence against an individual or group, the application should be universally applied. Most political misinformation and fake news content are easy to spot for people who remain informed about issues in our society. A bigger misleading practice, common for decades, is false narratives used to shape how society views political opponents, organizations, industries, groups of people, and other aspects of our society. A timeless marketing trick is to repeat something numerous times, especially if the content is not drawn for settled fact. The more a person hears something, the increased likelihood they will accept it as fact over time. Get a well-known person to make the claim and it will increase the stickiness of the message. In the political world, This is used commonly to shape how the public views candidates they do not personally know, issues they are not well versed on, and personal choices not in the frame of mind to make. How this is different from misinformation is largely regarded as stating something directly counter to verifiable facts or distorting interpretation of said facts. I would classify this as different because many consider the false narratives just political speak. Consider the effort to block the nomination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a perfect example of false narratives. The set of accusations played largely on the strong sentiment against sex crimes, which go unreported at times. After the accusations were vetted, it was clear that they were not credible. Many gaps in the story and reported behaviors that did not hold water. Not many victims of sex crimes would positively greet their abuser after the crime. The accuser might have been a victim, but clearly Kavanaugh was not the person at fault. But there are still people who hold strong opinions against him despite the clear lack of evidence. Despite the clear and obvious ploy by a political party desperate for power. A healthy democracy should protect people from the hysteria associated with mob rule. Hard to accept lectures from those who rely greatly on false narratives for political outcomes. A healthy democracy must have an economic system that embodies the same democratic values its society operates under. An economic system built for the people, by the people, and of the people. America needs free market capitalism to help protect private enterprise and economic freedom. While there are some associated challenges, free market capitalism is still the right path forward to combat social poverty, achieve economic growth, and foster an innovative society that raises the bar of human achievement. A healthy democracy needs an economy where people enjoy the opportunity to determine their own path and set their own expectations. A person's hard work, ingenuity, and motivation should determine outcomes, not a distant government that dictates a person's economic value. A healthy democracy allows people to decide the set of goods and services that society needs, not limited to the whims of a political class. The challenges of our free market economy are not natural results of the economic system, but largely a result of poor public policy kept in place because people accepted a status quo. Free market capitalism can help with industries with high cost to consumers like prescription drugs, health insurance, and energy. Increased market competition helps reduce consumer costs. Many industries with high cost typically have barriers to entry that restrict competition and consumer choice. Expanding providers in many local energy markets reduced costs to households. Nationalizing or subsidizing these industries will do nothing to reduce cost or fix market inefficiencies. Greater competition is needed in prescription drugs, healthcare, and student loans, which is dominated by government providers. Increasing competition through greater support for small businesses can help improve issues with income inequality, creating more opportunities for income mobility. Many aspects of public policy stifle competition in favor of existing market participants, which are typically corporations. Allowing new entrants to compete with corporations will help create a market regulating effect and expand opportunity for people to find new buyers for their labor. People do not want to be paid the same as others. They want the opportunity to be paid their market worth considering the skill set, performance, experience, and record of achievement with an organization. Some may argue that free markets contain some level of corruption. All economic systems face a level of corruption to some degree. For instance, Americans object to the practice of bribery, where it is considered a major crime. In many socialist nations, bribery is viewed as the cost of doing business or the way to make the wheels turn. There is always a need for rules and reasonable regulations to keep people from pushing the envelope on moral boundaries. No system is exempted from this. A healthy democracy needs an economy that grows, expands opportunity, and creates wealth for its people, which in turn funds government. A healthy democracy does not concentrate economic power with government, but within its people. A bigger misleading practice, common for decades, is false narratives used to shape how society views political opponents, organizations, industries, groups of people, and other aspects of our society. A timeless marketing trick is to repeat something numerous times, especially if the content is not drawn for settled fact. The more a person hears something, the increased likelihood they will accept it as fact over time. Get a well-known person to make the claim and it will increase the stickiness of the message. In the political world, this is used commonly to shape how the public views candidates they do not personally know, issues they are not well versed on, and personal choices not in the frame of mind to make. How this is different from misinformation is largely regarded as stating something directly counter to verifiable facts or distorting interpretation of said facts. I would classify this as different because many consider the false narratives just political speak. Consider the effort to block the nomination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a perfect example of false narratives. The set of accusations played largely on the strong sentiment against sex crimes, which go unreported at times. After the accusations were vetted, it was clear that they were not credible. Many gaps in the story and reported behaviors that did not hold water. Not many victims of sex crimes would positively greet their abuser after the crime. The accuser might have been a victim, but clearly Kavanaugh was not the person at fault. But there are still people who hold strong opinions against him despite the clear lack of evidence. Despite the clear and obvious ploy by a political party desperate for power. A healthy democracy should protect people from the hysteria associated with mob rule. Hard to accept lectures from those who rely greatly on false narratives for political outcomes. A healthy democracy needs a social institution to objectively hold government and other power brokers accountable to the best interests of the people they serve. Objective journalists utilize their constitutional protections to bring light on actions, policies, and behaviors that may harm our overall well-being, trusts, or future. At least in theory. Journalists should be able to set aside personal and political leanings to report on subjects. There is a difference between journalism and storytelling. Good journalism largely uncovers facts in their entirety and allows the reader to shape the final view. Storytelling uses select facts to promote a narrative, many times not accounting for or purposefully ignoring facts that clearly counter it. The news industry unfortunately competes against a multitude of sources providing news contents. Not journalism, but news content. News providers are a business, which competes in the entertainment industry. There is need not only to be informative but entertaining. Ratings may force providers to focus more on the entertaining side than informative side. For instance, ESPN is a great source for entertaining content in the sports world. If a reader wants to know the actual facts, he or she needs to visit other sites that do a much better job of providing a complete picture and context. I recently read an article on there about my favorite baseball team losing $145 million. Only to find out every baseball team seems to have losses at the same level due to COVID-19. There was a missing context and perspective. Many news broadcasts do a great job of stirring emotions, featuring panels of guests strategically chosen to advance a pre-selected narrative. Few inform the public. I have respect for journalists and news sources that actually report the news regardless of whether it is good or bad for the subject. Society needs journalists to start being journalists rather than serving as political cheerleaders, power brokers, and activists. There is a legitimate reason why the public does not trust the press. Understandably, news providers must compete with comedians acting as journalists. Compete against bloggers, podcasters, and social media influencers who do not have to meet journalistic standards maintained at certain long-standing providers. But the only way to gain the trust of the public and maintain high ratings is to focus on newsworthy content that is informative, insightful, objective, and impeccably sourced. Democracy is generally defined as a system of government built around the people, either through direct or indirect representation. The best way to protect our democracy is to make sure that America remains a free nation focused on the people. Protect the constitutionally guaranteed rights of every American. Protect their right to self-determination and self-reliance by ensuring our institutions work for the people they serve, not the people in power. Protect opportunity and private enterprise that uplifts communities. The best way to protect our democracy is not to empower the government over the people. Not to listen to false narratives that only serve to strengthen control of the political class over everyone else. Too much focus is placed on the political outcomes of favored politicians. It is the policy outcomes that really matters. Society needs to stop focusing on the celebrity of the people in power and more on the efficacy of the policies in place. Society needs to focus on how well our institutions work for the people as well as the government. A healthy democracy deserves a limited government with the power centered on the people and a free market economy with the power centered on the people. In closing, I thank you experiencing my podcast. Please click on my logo for more content.